Welcome, my friends, to Atomics on a Friday, a fascinating journey into the realm of cybersecurity, data, and atomic testing. Today, we shall embark on an adventure with two seasoned experts who have roamed the cyber wilderness for years, honing their skills and strategies. Paul Michaud, a master of cyber shenanigans, has an uncanny ability to unravel the most perplexing digital mysteries. Alongside him is Paul Haag, a cyber threat connoisseur who has devoted his life to understanding and mitigating the ever-present dangers lurking in the shadows of cyberspace. Together, they shall guide us through the complex tapestry of this digital ecosystem, revealing hidden treasures and secrets that will undoubtedly leave us with a newfound respect for the world of cybersecurity. So, dear viewers, let us dive deep into the heart of this wondrous realm, where the forces of good and evil collide in an eternal struggle, and let us explore what it truly means to protect our delicate digital existence. Join us on Atomics on a Friday.
Well, welcome to Atomics on a Friday yet again.
Thanks again for David Attenborough for phoning in every other Friday for us while we kick it off.
Yes, it has been a week of all kinds of stuff. I officially have mixed up like 12 different breaches, and there's like one giant one now.
I feel like we should just encompass them all into one breach and make it really, just call it the June 2023 incident, and just everything rolls into that. I mean, we only got, 14 days left in the month? Might as well.
Yeah, it's just June.
It's the incident.
Excellent. What else is going on today? Yeah, today we got quite the lineup. We've been going through kind of like atomic basics for the last few, and in this one, we're moving to the cloud. Just like every organization has a cloud migration plan, we do as well. Atomic has adapted.
I mean, just move to the cloud. It's more secure. You never run into cloud-related security issues in the cloud.
Ever.
Never.
Did you know that there was a Move It application on Azure? Did you see that?
Where they just pillaging the Azure blob storage, because that's where it would get stored.
No, yeah, I guess because I saw there was a way to like do a quick deploy, like you could just ship it onto the from the marketplace, like AWS marketplace. Like you just say, I want Move It, and you could like move it,
and then it would just move it to Azure for you.
It would just move it, and it would sing the song and everything. But yeah, so there was that. So cloud today. We have a special guest for everybody, and I hope he's ready. Yes, he's in.
How are you?
Jose. What's up, Jose?
Happy Friday. We made it.
Happy Friday. We are here. The kids agree.
Oh, sorry, you heard that. I don't know if you heard that. I got a recovering chicken back here. Failed to lay an egg, so literally recovering in my office right now.
That's awesome.
Phenomenal.
No chicken left behind, you know.
That's how June. That's how June is beginning to feel. Is no breach left behind.
No breach left behind. As you were saying, the whole call out an event. My mind goes to like Pacific Rim. Like the first kaiju's. That's June right there. It's like a Pacific Rim, like 8.1 magnitude earthquake off of San Francisco. Just 7 breaches in one shot.
I know we've had like what FortiGate, FortiGates. We've had MoveIts. We've had Barracudas getting attacked. Like it's like a week.
I'm waiting for the next one to be on the horizon, because we're only at 1 o'clock Eastern, so around like 3-4 o'clock would be the next one for the weekend. So we're getting close. It's the perfect time for a breach. Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock. Everybody's starting to leave. And the holidays. Don't forget the holidays.
Don't put that voodoo on us.
It's okay. I'm still out until next week anyway, so it's
I was gonna say
somebody else's problem.
you're out, right? Like, yeah.
Yes.
Is that why you're putting the bad juju out there, man?
Yeah.
Closing the
Somebody
door
else's problem
throwing the
until
grenade.
next week. And then I'll be back, and then it will become my problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It'll still be your problem.
Yeah. We're just postponing the problem.
Where are the atomics? Come on, Paul.
Yeah.
I got 4 of them shipped this week. I have like 5 more in the queue that I need to fix up, and then I think Hari will have to do some magic on them again.
I went to merge your PR, and then I saw that it was not in a good state. So I left it alone.
So I think there's still some work to be done converting to adding the TVAR setup.
Got it.
So Hari was taking care of that. But the things we're going to do today are basically copy and paste, and then you can go detect all the evil. So it should be good.
Nice. Cool.
Let's get
I'm
into
excited.
it. Let's jam.
I don't know any GCPs, so I'm ready to learn.
I think we have some sheeps to sweep as well at some point.
Yeah, sheep sweeping later on. That's exciting.
Clouds and sheep.
Yeah. Sorry, I was clicking buttons.
Oh yeah, we did. Oh no, I guess
I'll let you drive.
Oh, I guess I could. All right, Google Cloud Platform. I guess we'll jump into it. I thought the agenda thingy was after the pictures, but I don't know. We've only been doing this for like 5 months now, and I don't know where, but good enough. Google Cloud Platform, basically similar to AWS and Azure. There are integrations or associations if you run Google Workspace. So think Google Workspace, the equivalence of Office 365. So basically the collaboration communication side of things. Offers email, documents like Google Slides, Google Excel, their sheets, etc. So there is some things that when you have the two and connect them or create projects for the organization that you'll see in different log platforms, but you do not explicitly have to run Google Workspace with Google Cloud Platform. Basically, Google Cloud Platform gives you a couple options to interact with it. One of the most common ways, the G-Cloud CLI, very similar to like Azure's PowerShell modules as well as AWS's interface. But then, of course, you can also do like direct REST API calls. I couldn't fit the pictures on this page, so we'll jump into it. So basically, the first part or the first image is showing using like the Google Cloud CLI. So you give it what the service you're going to interact with, as well as then the specific node, and then the action, create, delete, list, get, etc. And then below that is exactly like what you would put in for like a REST API. So all those CLIs for AWS, G Cloud, etc., are just wrappers for APIs. If you run something like a Fiddler or a proxy, Burp Suite, and you call them, you can watch and see the structure. It calls Python to wrap it and do all the magic, and then ships it out the door. And then you get the responses. Just a easier way to interact with it versus having to constantly structure post requests, etc.
Nice.
So why GCP? So a couple weeks ago, I started doing some research and I wanted to dig into some cloud-based things. So I said, why not GCP? Been Google Workspace user for years. Also started doing a little GCP things. And it's also not really looked into compared to like Azure or AWS. Basically, there's like a handful of blogs and things out there that I found interesting. So there's 2 that were prevalent. One is from Expel and the other is from Unit 42, Palo Alto, with some very similar overlapping TTPs, but I presume these would be different. So there's kind of some examples of creating service accounts, deleting service accounts, keys, etc. And then actually I came across, I think Friday was last week, I saw a conference called Forward CloudSec, if I remember correctly is what it's called. Basically a completely cloud-based security conference, which was pretty cool. It was 2 days earlier this week. And some really awesome talks, so highly recommend checking it out. All the videos were actually on YouTube, so it was cool. So if you couldn't make it in person, you could actually live stream them right on YouTube. So highly recommend checking them out. And there was actually some cool ones. Datadog had a talk. So Dave Johnson from Datadog gave a talk on GCP, which is actually coincidental. There's no correlation. So as I was looking into things, I saw like Friday last week that he was giving a talk, and I'm like, oh, this is great because this is when I ship some of these atomics downrange. And so it's extreme overlap. And they also have a blog post out as well, which we'll reference later. So the atomics themselves are pretty straightforward, very basic. If you can set up the G-Cloud CLI, you can just populate these things in. So the inputs are going to be the project ID. So if you create, which we'll get into in a little bit, is Google Cloud has the kind of very similar to like Azure for an organizational standpoint of when you create resources and resource groups. If you're familiar with that, Google Cloud has organization as kind of like the parent, and then you have folders and then projects and then the resources. So things like in Google Cloud, they call them instances. So think of that as like EC2 or compute. VMs basically, and so very similar things that you can do. So whatever you can do in AWS or Azure, you can do in Google Cloud. They all have their nice fun names of everything. So the first one is basically just creating a custom IAM role. So it'll take in, parse in the project ID, give it the role name you want to create, the description of it, set the permissions. So in this case, the permission to be set is the IAM service account get. So only have the ability to retrieve or list service accounts. You could go and add in comma separated values of a whole bunch of other roles that if you wanted to apply to it and test like, can I detect or see these in the logs? Next one is deleting a service account. So this one, oh, Jose, I saw you.
Quick question, Paul.
You had questions. Yeah, feel free to interrupt.
Okay. Hey, with Atomic Red Team, how do we like differentiate this from like a Windows Atomic or Mac or Linux? Is there like
Great
a way for
question.
us to?
There is.
Okay. Oh,
so in this
sweet.
case, well, let me rephrase that. I thought I had an idea of where you were going, but in the platform support, it'll say something like Windows, Linux, Mac, IaaS, GCP, Azure, AWS. So it'll specify which platform it supports. In this case,
Cool.
while I was running these tests or Google Cloud CLI, the G Cloud CLI on a Windows box, you can set, this is specifically for like Linux and Mac.
Okay.
There could be some magic to make this also support like Windows. The commands would be almost identical, but in this case, this one got a little wonky because the way I wanted to retrieve the key and associate the key to a variable and then explicitly delete that key. When you enable a service in G Cloud, a default service account is created. So obviously you didn't want to just delete that key. So you want to create a key or create a service account, create a key associated to it, then go and delete that. So it does kind of the work for you of creating that and then going and deleting it. So technically there's a couple atomics rolled into one just because you need something to exist and you don't want to just delete prod things. I mean, you could go ahead, like you do you. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but if you want to be safe about it, it is. Put these into an atomic project. You could actually have a project, create project, go spin it up, and then run all the things in there. So in this case, it will create the service account. Then it will go and create the key. The fun fact about the key is that when you go create it, you have to specify a path where it's going to write the key out to a file. So when I was testing this, I was like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, just go create the key and then like assume I would download it later or retrieve it later. But they're like, no, you got to save the key now when you create it. So the caveat with this one is the only cleanup that's needed is going to be deleting the key off of your disk. The actual command will go, it'll create the service account, it'll create the key, it will then retrieve the key, save it as a variable, delete the key, and then delete the service account. So the only cleanup is to actually delete the key off your disk. If you didn't delete it or run the cleanup command, doesn't matter because that service account and key will no longer exist anyway. So even if somebody did get a hold of it or you tried to use it. Expel had an interesting blog post and report that actually kind of showed the service key deletion in there. So that's kind of interesting, fun take of an in the wild sample, which we kind of talked about earlier. So you can check that one out as well. Next one is a pretty easy one, which is just deleting a bucket. So create a bucket, delete it, call it a day. In this case, you can see at the bottom for some of our cleanup and commands is using Terraform. So there was a recent PR maybe a month or two ago that supports invoke using and leveraging Terraform files for creating the resources necessary. I'm not a Terraform Voodoo master, so I just use the CLI commands, but Hari on the maintainers team is doing his magic and making these support Terraform files, which is why they're not fully merged yet. So if you're looking for these specific atomics, they don't exist in the repo yet, but you can go look at the pull request. And the last one is to delete the activity logs. So one of the things I found interesting was when researching this is that there are default audit logs created, similar to what I presume is like AWS's CloudTrail, which is just logging, hey, I made an API call to create a service account, and it logs it. Well, it's like, well, as an attacker, why would I create a bunch of stuff and then not cover my tracks? So I thought, well, let's just delete them. They even specify, Google does in their docs, that you can't delete these. There's 4 specific, what they call audit logs. You can't delete them. You can make the call to them, and it's going to generate an error in the log and then say that you did it. But I also found it interesting because why not have an alert for that or have a test for that? So we'll actually look into like Google's like nice interface and run some tests. But we should probably do demo first. Let's go to demo. Or not. Let's do it live.
Do it live, which is like 5 slides away, but that's okay.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll do your demo again. We'll do it twice.
Yeah, we'll just do it again. All right. So with the atomic test, there is a command for initialization. Because I'm already I've already authorized the command prompt and then set the default for projects. I'm not going to run those, but there is a basic command for initialization and then specifically specifying which account you're going to use to actually run said tests. So let's run the first one. So the nice thing about these CLI wrappers is they're very structured and straightforward. So gcloud and then the service you're going to hit. So in our case, we're going to create a custom IAM role, then specifically roles, which is the node that we're going to hit, and then the actual command. So in this case, we will create a custom atomics on a Friday IAM role. So in this case, again, the service we're going to hit is IAM. We're going to specifically target roles. There's actually a few different things we can do within the IAM service. We're going to create, in this case, we're going to call it atomics on a Friday. We can give it a nice description. The permissions. So again, if I were to run this via like invoke, all these would be defaulted for me. And then I would just need to use the input overrides or specify them within CLI variables, etc., and then specify the project. So if I go do that, again, it's just a wrapper for like the REST APIs. So it'll run, do its request, take a second, and then return out the results. Taking sweet time. There we go. And that was it. Created the account, gave it the role, gave it the permission, in this case here, and we give it the nice description. To delete it, pretty basic, as you guessed. The command is going to be to delete the account and specify the project. If you don't, when you're using Google Cloud, if you have multiple projects, you don't have to have a default. So when you initialize gcloud, it defaults to like a specific project. You can just override those by specifying the project. So if I say, hey, this is the only project I'm working on, I don't have to specify it, which is why in the atomics, you'll see the project flag. So that way you can override it. Otherwise, if you are working in one project, then you go run the test, it could target the project that you don't want. So it's a fun fact for that.
And I see you put those as input arguments as well, which is like life-saving.
I tried to make it as very simple as possible, especially somebody not cloud savvy like myself, trying to learn about it. So that was kind of fun. So in this case, cool. let's go create a service account. Jose.
I have a very, very dumb question.
He lives.
Any reason like you're not using an execution engine, or like would this work with invoke or something like that?
Yeah, so the reason I don't have it set up is that the PR is actually not fully merged yet. So it's in there. Hari's working on the TVAR side of things. But these are the commands explicitly taking out of the atomics. So if you want to go do this one by one, that's the way I found it easiest. But yeah, so that's why we're doing it right now. And I don't have my invoke set up for that specific branch. So I said, I'll just copy and paste
Oh,
the commands.
I was worried. I'm like, we have something broken, though.
I was just like going to look at the repo now.
Fire hat on, you know, like, what do we do? Fix it. kidding.
What did you break?
Incident Friday.
Exactly.
So again, because we're going to interact with the IAM service, which I should have clarified, when you create a project in Google Cloud, you have to enable services. So not all of them are just enabled. You have to specify which ones you want. So if you want things like IAM, or you want logging, or you're going to say, hey, this project's going to involve some VM, so I need instance service enabled. You have to explicitly enable those per project and then specify different service accounts. That is the one nice thing about when you're setting up in Google Cloud, and I don't know how other cloud providers or platforms do this, but is that you have to be explicit about what you want enabled and don't want enabled. Now, there are some defaults, but it does make it nice that you're not just overly permissioned off of the bat. Now, when you start enabling them, they are a little bit.
Question.
Mike,
Can we?
maybe I have an answer.
Can we enable those via gcloud command line?
You absolutely can. There is a method for that. I think it's like Google Cloud Projects or Google Cloud Services, and then enable, and then you have to give it the explicit service that you want to enable.
Nice.
Oh, I added an R. Okay.
R.
Remember that there's an extra R on the end of our service account name for when we go and try and delete these now, because
Update.
You know what? I'm just gonna, because otherwise the rest of the commands are just gonna be problematic. So now we have two service accounts, and I'll just make sure to delete them both. But now let's actually go create a key. So we created the service account. We need a key associated with it so that we could actually utilize it. When you create a service account, there are default service accounts that are created by GCE, so the engine, and those actually have an infinite expiration on them. If you go look, when we jump into the cloud platform, we'll take a look, but it's like 7,000 years. So the default ones are definitely never going to expire, which is great if you're like, yeah, just set it up and never renew it. But as you can see, that becomes problematic. So now when we create the keys, again, we have to specify that we're going to create it. But what we need to also pass is a path to where the key is going to get written to disk, because it won't let you just create it without it. You have to specify it. And then in this case, we're going to explicitly state when you create a key for a service count, you have to give it the fully qualified domain name. So you can't just say, hey, give me Atomics on a Friday. You have to give it, which in this case is the project ID inside of the organization you're working on. So you have to specify explicitly what that is. I will go do it. And then it created that. And then what we can do is now, because in the case of our Atomic, we do this for you, but let's go run a service counts list. Actually, I think I need keys list. Nope. What did I do? Oh, because I need the specific IAM. So what I got angry about was that I didn't specify a key to use, or an account to use, the specific service account. And actually, let's see. So here, for example, is the infinite key. So that key ID is associated to the default service account. In this case, when we created it, it's going to enable it for the year 9,999. So that's your default one. Great again if you don't want to ever forget to rotate keys. Bad if you ever lose that. But now let's go and delete it. So in this case, what we need is this key, or this variable. And what this does is this is going to specify which key to delete. So in this case, I'm just going to do that. And when you're running it interactively, it prompts you. In the case of the Atomic test, we added the tac quiet flag, which is basically just going to say force yes, don't prompt you. It's just going to do it on the back end for you. Service account key is met. Did I copy the wrong one? I might have.
Not sure.
Find out.
I see on the atomic you have a drop to key.json. Yeah.
Yep, that's the actual key. Yep. So if we wanted to, what we could then do now is we could go use that key and use that to authenticate, and then use that to do whatever. And whatever roles and permissions are assigned to that account, we could then have permission into that. I was going to probably error out. I don't know why. But we'll just skip it, and we'll just delete that manually. But we can then delete the service account, which again, it will, we have a whole bunch of these that some of these atomics actually have multiple techniques in there, if you will. Create an account, delete an account, modify an account, right? They're kind of like bundled together. If you think about like an actual attack, that's generally how it is, right? If I run PowerShell and do some command, there's like 3 or 4 TTPs grouped into one action, even though they're technically separate because you can have different data points. Next one, real quick, we'll just kind of plow through these because we do want to go into ShellSweep, which I want to dig into. So that will just create a sheep sweep. That's right. Create the bucket and then simply delete it. And then the last one being attempting to delete the audit logs, which will fail.
So the Google Cloud, I know you mentioned it's very similar to AWS and whatnot. They have like, it's similar like S3 bucket for storage and a root account like AWS and all that kind of stuff too.
Yep. And you can set them to be public. I think the parameter is all users, which is like the public variation.
Okay.
Now, what in Google's docs, and I forget specifically what it is, there's certain things that don't get logged when you have like public access. So something like deleting a file or retrieving a file, if it's public, it won't log it, and it won't log specific things in case of like privacy. If like we don't want just to log anybody who's ever touched the thing, so that there's like specific parameters when you have that. But when you create a bucket, it doesn't default to that. So then you'd create a bucket, you would change the permission on it, right? There's 2 separate logs looking for like the public access. That would be like an interesting one. Yeah. In this case, you can see that we then successfully deleted the bucket. We could do a storage buckets list and prove that we don't have any buckets, but we'll skip that for right now. So this is the interesting one. This is the log source where all of the logs are stored. So everything we've ran so far, even the things that failed, generate an event log, which is nice because then we can validate, hey, somebody missed a typo, or all of a sudden you have all these different points. I go to run it. You're like, hey, this is going to work. I'm going to be great. I'm going to cover my tracks. And it's like, oh, just kidding. You can't. So they're actually there, which is nice. So you can't just delete them. And they are defaulted to 30 days, if I remember correctly, which can also then be modified to expand out. Obviously, the more data you have, the more storage you're going to pay for. But in like a testing lab environment for the project, so far I've spent a single $1, and that was because the free credits I used on some non-thing that's not covered in a free tier. So for a week of testing and hundreds of logs generated, I've spent $0.
Paul, do you need a GCP sponsor?
Yes. So if you're looking for sponsorship opportunities.
All right. My next question is, what are you drinking? Because that looks not like coffee.
It's liquid death.
Oh, okay.
It's mountain water. It's
need to like
water in a can.
The screen.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
If Liquid Death wants to sponsor some computer nerds, I'm open. All right. So we generated a whole bunch of tests. Let's go look at the logs. And let me full screen this. So that way I don't share some other things.
Paul, while you're bringing that up, I have 2 quick questions.
I maybe have an answer.
These sets of techniques, I looked at the PR and I noticed that you referenced Elastic as one of the inspirational sources. Is there any attack you've seen this kind of done in, like against a cloud, like against a customer who's using GCP as a cloud provider?
Yes. So in the 2 that so actually there's kind of like 3 blogs. So one was written by Datadog. which kind of did reference a couple known points and also some unknowns. Expel had a blog out which referenced some different TTPs that were leveraged specifically against GCP, and same with Palo Alto. Within there were specific, like what they noted, which could be referenced, and in Elastic's rule set, they actually probably had like 10 or 20 rules that were already predefined. Now, I don't know if they had leveraged those or seen those from in the wild attacks, or if it was based on theoretical, hey, you could create a service account, there's your privilege escalation, your persistence, etc., which a lot of these. And so when I was researching them, I was like, well, that's cool. If I have the detection, though, so the analytic, how do I prove that I generate the data? And so it's great that you have these rules already, but I needed a way to test them. So I started going through and I said, well, these are in the wild samples, these are different points, and just kind of like bring the 3 or 4 resources together, which is super handy. And I gotta say, the Datadog log that we have, it's referenced at the end, and I think in the next slide, which is pretty cool, is I just took off a key. Super helpful for like talking about these logs. So we're gonna run a query. This the last 14 days. Let's run it for the last 45 minutes. So this is the logging service. Now, again, just like what you have to do, you have to enable logging for the project. By default, I think it's turned on by default. I might have added it. I don't remember. We could go look at the logs and actually find out who turned the logging on. It might be GCE. It could be me. I don't remember. So these are all the different things that we saw. So already we can kind of start to see some of the method names that we already did, right? We created a role. We deleted the role. We created a service account. We created a service account key. We listed the service account. We listed the keys, right? So we have all these different single points. Now, one of the things that's interesting about cloud, right? We can take some of the attacks that we see on the traditional like network or endpoint level and apply the same rules, right? We create a user, we add a firewall rule, which we see in like some of the things that Unit 42 and Expel noted, which was creating like firewall rules for outbound connections for crypto mining, right? Like, but the difference is we have different ways of collecting data on the endpoint that we don't have in cloud. So whatever we get is what we're beholden to. There's no like magic, like let me go like get it from a different source. No, it's whatever the cloud provider gives you is what they give you. So hopefully it's good enough. And the one thing is nice about even just these default logs is that they're good starting points. They have good information in them. And you can see here, in this case, like this is the error log. So they have severity levels. So anything with the red exclamation points is going to be an error. And then what we can see here is the specific log name, the type. So in this case, auditing log, we can see the method name. So basically what was the API that was hit? In this case, logging service, trying to delete the log. And then you get like the request information. So like, excuse me, request metadata. So like, where did the caller IP come from? What was the user agent that was supplied? So if we're thinking about, okay, how do I then start to validate normal activity or normal like, hey, systems team created these user accounts versus adversary? Well, we can start using things like enrichment of IPs, as well as user agent strings, commonalities, principles, etc., and determine those. So that's kind of like helpful in this case. But super helpful for all of these from these tests. And then you can do your magic of however you're running your analytics, whether it's forward them off into like an Elastic integration or a Splunk. You can do all of that fun magic.
Second question from earlier. When you're running these, building this GCP test, did you see any tool that would do this for the user? Like these things seem like awfully similar to like what a tool like Paku would do from Rhino Security, right? Where like I think they're running the APIs for AWS under the hood. They're just wrapping it for that red teamer to like make the workflow a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
And to your point about like looking for like user agents, those are like super low hanging fruits for like, hey, somebody's running Paku versus like this is legitimately, you know, like my developer on his machine, right? Like,
so I think there's GCP exploit. There's some other tools. I didn't explicitly I've kind of searched and tried to come across them, but I didn't explicitly dive into those. I was more focused on like, because those are just going to interact and wrap with the APIs that exist. Right. Again, there's no magic.
Yeah. They're going to the same place you're going, essentially, right? Like
exactly. It's just
the logs are going to be the same at the end of the day. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I have had that top of mind, the tooling part of it.
Yeah, no, I'm curious as to though, because they're probably going to use like the actual REST API versus in this case, like the wrapper of like G-Cloud CLI. So I'm curious as to like, are they doing any customizations of the request with like user agent string? What's their magic behind it? I didn't actually dive into that, but it's still an interesting idea to dig into.
Yeah, I'll take that away.
Yeah. So quick detections. So just kind of we touched on. So when you're creating custom IAM roles, you can see here in this case, the method name is going to kind of be the trigger. And if we look at things like the Elastic Labs and also Datadog's blog and Dave Johnson's amazing talk, which outlined it, as well as went into some different things about tuning the alerts, as well as enriching some of those data points that were inside of the JSON log that we saw. So highly recommend checking that out. So things like the IAM, you can see here again, you can kind of almost see a pattern of how Google's structuring the method names, right? Very similar to how we ran those commands and how the REST API is structured. You have the service, you have the thing, and then you have whatever you did, right? Get, delete, list, create, etc. And then the last one being looking at activity logs. So again, now focusing on like severity being error because it will still generate, but it's going to have a severity of error versus in the other ones, which what are they called? Intro or info, excuse me. It's the severity on like the default ones. So like when we created the service account or they created the role, the severity is info. Like, okay, thanks. And we can tune those. Or excuse me, we can't. But yeah, that was my thing in GCP. Did a whole bunch more stuff with it, as well as like integrations with Google Workspace and how creating like organizations and all that stuff. But this is kind of just 4 quick atomics downrange referenced on already existing analytics. Like Splunk has analytics for this stuff, as well as Elastic, which is their integration rule set. So like the things already existed, but there was no test for it. So I just simply went and created a test, and then here we are.
That's awesome.
GCP.
This is awesome, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know. I feel like Google Cloud is kind of the sleeper. Everybody's so focused on AWS and Azure, but like really think about who is using Google Cloud. Google.
Yeah.
There's a big acquisition that occurred.
Everybody buys AWS for backup. Like if you're doing it right, you're probably buying both. Like
you could probably also go look at like MX records and determine which orgs are using Google Workspace. And I'm sure some of them, not all of them, but some of them are also probably using Google Cloud Platform. So also interesting in that aspect.
Sleeper.
But there's just not a ton out there on GCP. But again, if you can apply the same concept of what you're doing to Azure, AWS, it probably exists in Google Cloud. Same with any of them. You take whatever you do in GCP over to AWS, etc. But for whatever reason, just nobody's really looking in GCP. So I decided to. Maybe I'll have some blogs out on creating projects and setting up IAM roles and accounts for testing, etc.
Do you know which day Dave Johnson's talk was for ForwardSec? CloudSec?
Yeah. Let me check my calendar. I believe that was Monday, maybe? No.
That day 1 or day 2?
It was Monday, and he was in Salon C. I don't know how they're going to break out things, but if you go look at Cloud, it was Cloud C, and it was at
cool.
2 o'clock Eastern, so that would have been, 11 o'clock West Coast time? Something like that? I don't know. We need to start putting con talks in UTC times.
Yeah.
It's the only
YouTube,
acceptable.
UTC.
Yes.
YT, UTC. Anyway, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. That's awesome. Good ads. Are these the first GCPs as well? Yeah. That's cool.
No, there's actually only 2
No?
GCP specific atomics. I think there's 1 or 2 Google Workspace ones, but specifically for GCP, there's only like 1 or 2 for atomics. So here's 4 more at some point will be merged in. And then I have probably 5 or 6 more I think I can squeeze in for in the next week or 2 to round out some of the testing.
That is cool.
And,
Excellent.
well, I haven't looked at the PR too hard, but is it using, like, I know Haref from the maintainers team has a new format for like being able to run all of this essentially with Terraform. Did you end up leveraging that, or like how was that experience? I haven't even used it myself yet.
No, so when I created it, I was simply just using the gcloud CLI. So the prerequisite for those tests in the original state were going to be you needed the gcloud CLI installed, go install it, and then it will do the initialization stuff for you. So if you just spin up like a VM, install gcloud, and then go through like the auth side of things, it will have it. But no, I didn't use Terraform. And some of these tests you won't need Terraform for, like for example, like deleting the audit log, even though it's not going to work. You just use the gcloud. But creating the bucket, you could use Terraform for creating the bucket, deleting the bucket, etc. Well, excuse me. Terraform won't delete the bucket. It just structures how the bucket is, and then still use gcloud for actually creating or deleting the bucket. It just specifies the parameters of the bucket. Same with a couple other ones like the service count or some of the other ones. So there's probably 2 or 3 that are going to be Terraform supported, but still wrapped in gcloud for the actual execution side of it. It's my understanding. But again, not a Terraform expert.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. Not a
Terraform is just magic. No, it's just magic. It just does things and things show up.
We'll be understanding Terraform for the next 100 years. It's an abstraction for the abstraction. That was an abstraction, basically. Like, we'll do it live.
All of our slides are out of order.
Amazing.
We did the demo. We did detections. At least we remembered to do detections and mitigations this time. Mitigations, lock down your stuff. Day's talk actually had some really interesting points on limiting access, and service accounts should only be occurring or executing within the Google Cloud infrastructure. So anything like an external IP in the logs for a service account, if you set it up right, should be like a red flag. So there's some interesting data points on there from that point.
That is cool.
So we did clouds. Now we need to talk sheeps and shells.
Sheep shells.
Sheep sweep. We need to sweep our sheeps, as the kids say.
Sheep sweeper.
So Mike, what is ShellSweep?
Great question. Yeah. So ShellSweep was born out of the feeling that I could not develop decent content for the MoveIt exploitation when it occurred. Adversary was popping web shells on this app, and I just was like, of course you can write, whatever web app spawning a shell or writing ASPX or whatever. There was no POC for MoveIt at the beginning, and so I just went right to the end. I was like, what's a good way for me to detect web shells in a novel way, and just a way, like I just want to be able to give something and detect shells. And so I've been thinking about this probably since like February. And so I finally just this kind of just pushed it to the edge of like, let's do something. So we get to do a demo. And I will find the buttons. So yeah, let me find the window. This box. Yeah, so the project's officially open. It's under my GitHub page or repo name, Hagas ShellSweep. And I kind of pitch it as a suite of tools, because you can't say ShellSweep without sweep enough times. It's like that truck that drives by that says you can't say Swiss without a smile, it's like that. But so yeah, more or less, it's a suite of 3 different utilities. The 3 tools allow you to baseline first, kind of like take a bunch of web shells and get all of their entropy. And entropy is outlined as to what entropy is. And so it has like this whole piece right here talking about entropy, why we're looking at entropy. And in this particular case, entropy focuses on like obfuscation in scripts or any kind of encryption in them. The idea is that a web shell will always have a higher entropy than like a standard ASPX file. And I'm saying ASPX mainly because that's where I focus the most at. JSP web shells are or JSP in general is kind of structured a lot different. Same with JS, same with ASP, and everything. And I'll show you in a second those entropy values and how they look a little bit different. The other thing that I found while researching this is I wanted a non-standard web shell. So I actually went and used Metasploit to exploit my Exchange server again with proxy shell. And so it drops its like randomly generated, whatever .aspx on disk. It does obviously delete it post for like cleanup with proxy shell, but I captured the shell and I ran it through ShellSweep, and it made me think about shells a little bit differently, because typically every web shell that I'll show you here in a minute has a very high entropy, meaning they're just like very like obvious. But the web shell from proxy shell actually has a very low entropy compared to anything else on disk. So I found entropy to be very interesting to play with, and I hope people can check this out and deploy it or test it and see what you get out of it. Yeah, it just kind of counts things. It looks at the frequency of stuff. It just kind of determines, how suspicious something is. And like I joked on Twitter, it's kind of like the whole gate.php, like we're still seeing it, right? Like, but web shells, we're still seeing web shells. They're still using them. We got, AV and EDR and IDSs and WAFs and all these cool things, but it's like, we still can't determine a web shell. So yeah, first let's talk about shell scan. I know we have a few minutes. So shell scan literally will take, how I use it, I'll just say how I use it. So what I do is I take a bunch of known web shells out there on the interwebs. I also took and captured the human2 ASPX files from the Move It campaign, all from like, I think it was Mandiant's blog, the CISA report. I took all of those. I threw them in the mix of this as well, mainly so that I could just see their entropy values in comparison to like other entropies. And so I took all that, threw all of it in there, and everything like that. So everything's mixed, and the output of it is a long string showing you by file extension. And I'm just going to move this up so you can actually see more of them. It's kind of verbose, and that's kind of the idea, is it will go through each directory and it will give you the entropies for each shell that you're looking at. And based on that file extension, it will attempt to categorize all of them together. And you notice there's like some that just have like TXT, like these ones right here, the human ones, and they mostly are categorized or have very similar entropies because they're literally the same shells, just found differently. So it takes all these extensions and then now it just pops it out for you. Obviously things that are a lot more nasty looking, like if you were to like do a strings on a zip file, it's going to just be a bunch of like jumbo because it's a compressed file. So the entropy is high. And then as it goes on, right? So entropies across the board for all these things. And there's things that I never even heard of, like ASHX. Okay. Obviously like the typical stuff. So the idea is that we could take these ranges and go back to our third tool, which is ShellSweep itself, and input these into ShellSweep to help us look for web shells. But then I was like, well, you can see the variance here is like, based on these web shells, one of them has like a 1.29, like the smallest one. Like, how often are you going to see that? And or in comparison, you most likely on your Exchange server, most of your ASPX or any kind of like web files are all going to be kind of like higher than more than lower. So something I added was another one was called Shell CSV. And the idea is this is like you take it and you run it on like your Exchange server or your web servers. And it's meant to give you an output in a very nice CSV format. And I gave an example here of all of the web shells that I sweeped. And so this includes even the web shells from the recent, I don't know Microsoft's new naming scheme, but it was on the recent report that came out, I don't know, like laced tornado or something for whatever. So that web shell's in here too. All the human web shells from the CISA report, things like that, and then plus all the ones from the repos, just to kind of show you this is what like shell CSV will output. And then on the right-hand side is the SHA-256 of each one of these, and I'll show you why that's important too. So the idea is that with ShellSweep, you put this on, say, a web server, you use like a Splunk universal forwarder, you're able to somehow kick it off and have an output occur. ShellSweep allows for a couple things. You can specify the file extensions you want to scan for. So if you're running Nginx, you're probably not running ASPX. So you might want to look for like, say, PHP or something else, right? Well, that's where like Shell CSV can help you baseline, like, oh, like I do have ASPX running on my Nginx server or something, right? So you're able to specify the file extensions you want to use. You can hard code or you can input your own entropy values, or based on Shell CSV, you can take like your average out of it of the actual files on your web server and take those entropy values and put it in there. You can specify paths that you want to include for your scanning and or exclude in your scanning. And yeah, you can also filter based on hashes. So if you end up having like, let's say for Exchange, you have an entropy on a known good hash in the path that you really, really want to scan all the time, and the hash is like a 7 entropy, well, you can just say, this is known good, I'm just going to always ignore it, so I don't have to like trigger on this all the time. Whoops, lost my browser. So let me show this in ShellSweep real fast before I do a live demo of ShellSweep. And there's my ASCII. All right, so all the extensions, I just left everything in here as a kind of like an example. These are values that I found and I've been tuning for my Exchange server. There is a way, and that's why I had to put it in here, because when I saw those values from proxy shell, I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to catch it, because there is standard code ASPX files that are low as well, or a little bit higher than like a 0.8. So I was like, well, let's do a less than and greater than. So I added those in here too. So you can shoot for something higher or something lower. And now you can modify it. You kind of create like this range of like a known good range and a obviously bad range. You can add all those values in there. If you're running Exchange, you may not need some or certain ones. You can out it, just baseline and find out. And then down here, the only thing you have to hard code is just your paths that you want to scan in. And in this case, I chose the paths for my Exchange server, where like the proxy shell, like shells would drop. And so you can actually back some of these out. You can just say all of the Exchange server path, like everything, just go scan it all. Or, you know, you want to just scan all of www root. Everybody's environment's going to be way different. So you just need to add in what you want to scan. Same with excluded. If you were like me, initially I was like, I want to scan the whole C drive. And I did. And it was like, wow, this is bad. And so then I was like, I need the way to exclude paths because it gets sketchy real fast. The main one being WinSXS. So there's like a crap ton of ASPX in there for funsies. Learned from experience. And then all of these are just like some hashes I found in my environment. And I was thinking, if someone's going to consume this, you might want to create like an actual text file with all the ignore hashes, just in case like you're baselining and you're just like, whoa, there's so much stuff and my interview values are decent, but at the same time, they're not decent enough. Let me go and ignore like the known goods. And I could just drop a text file and call it good. And then you don't have to like deal with that. Yeah, that's kind of that. I can run these live. Do it live.
Yeah, let's see one of them live.
Yep.
Dealer's choice.
I meant,
if you want Lua, Python, or PowerShell.
Oh yes, we forgot. Yeah. So it is cross-platform. I did write it in Python as well. It has a different cool snake ASCII art because why not? Same concept. It has extensions and paths and all that. It does work. It will probably break. But otherwise, let me know if it breaks. I'll try to fix it. Same with Lua. It works. It's kind of wacky, but if you want to run Lua, but your Barracuda will thank you.
I was just about to ask why Lua out of the 58,000 programming languages we have. PowerShell, sure, makes sense. Windows. Python, sure, makes sense. Linux. And then there's just Lua, which hasn't been around or used in.
Nmap scripting engine, man. Like, just begging to run into a ShellSweep with Nmap.
I said there's like 3 tools that are actually written actively in Lua to this day, as opposed to some governmental tools that are not publicly available at this point in time yet. But yeah,
so good. So yeah, if you want to
also works on your Barracuda or your Cisco ASA,
Yes, exactly.
Maybe your 40 Met. Who knows?
Yeah, if you want to scan that CUDA, find some evils. There you go, man. Like, drop it in there, see what happens. Do it live.
I'm gonna start hosting all of the torrents on my CUDAs.
Yeah,
we're doing now, right?
Nobody will know.
Barracuda's the new NAS.
Yeah. All right, let me flip over to my other server, my Exchange server, so that we can actually see web shells. Share, and there it is. So I basically I guess it's a little bit older of a version, but it's the same version with all the same entropies, and it should have the same paths down here. Yeah, it does. We're good. All right, we're good people. We are good. So I'll hide that, and then yeah. Well, first, hang on. We should probably do a shell CSV run. And this is going to run against, I don't know. What is it going to run against? Oh, yeah. We will do the Exchange front end and root and ship it. And then it outputs to the temp directory. Go grab that right here. And then now you can, again, the idea with this one is to just go through and like, okay, like this is legit, this is evil, this is legit. Why is it called frowny or frony? I don't even know. That's definitely evil, so forth. And you got your JS files, so you can kind of see the difference of the entropy values and like where JS like kind of lives at. And those are like legit JS. And you'll notice here too on these web shell ones, this is the proxy not shell or proxy shell. There's like that 0.4 and yeah, and it's like, but Mike, like why is it low? And this is why it's low. It's just padded null values for the most part.
It's null all over the place.
Yeah.
This is awesome,
Nulls.
Mike.
Yeah.
As you're going through it, I kept thinking back to, have you seen this tool from Zor called Phishing Cacher? It's a little bit old, or old in like 4 years old, maybe?
Like old as in used it with Lua or like really?
No, like I think it's been around for a little bit. But I shared a link here. It basically uses like entropy as one of the methods to so like it will analyze domains registers to like certificate transparency, and then it uses a set of like mechanisms to determine whether it's potentially a phishing domain registered or not. And one of the ways that there's entropy, but as we were going through, I was thinking, man, like you already have narrowed down stuff by file path, and right, like and I'm sure like as you're looking at some of the shells, like the naming convention of a shell, like a web shell versus like a legit file is going to be very different. Like some of these look kind of random. I'm sure some of them say door or shell in them when they get dropped, right? Like, folks are not creative. So like similar to like Phishing Catcher, where he kind of builds like a scoring system where he's like, hey, if you have like the keyword blah, I'm gonna give you 10 points, and if your entropy is this much, I'm gonna give you 50 points, whatever. And he says, hey, dude, high score, you're bad. Low score, you're not, right? It's an approach. I just as a person like, oh man, this is one awesome, a completely novel way to look at it. yeah, this is
so you like jumped to the end of my demo, and
I'm sorry, dude.
yeah. So no, just
I got super excited about it. I apologize.
Absolutely ruined it.
I know. No, but I'm
Just
really
close
glad
it
you
up.
shared that because
Let's
that
go
is
home.
like super cool.
Never inviting this guy ever again.
Man. No, but yeah, let me just run this real quick and then I'll tell you about that, what you were just saying. All right, so we're just gonna ship this downrange. ShellSweep will run. I have my entropies a little loose right now, but you can kind of get the idea. Again, the idea would be to filter these out so that you don't have to deal with like the known goods, and then you would be down to the point of like these sketchy ASPX files sitting in like my front end Exchange server here. And then now my plan was to ship this with like how to use it with like a Splunk UF and just have like it run, I don't know, whatever, every 12 hours, right? And just output anytime something actually occurs or is sitting that's fresh and has within my ranges and whatnot, and it's not on my allow list or deny list.
Could you pull in the create time of the file as well?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one to add. I didn't even think of that.
Spitball.
I was just too excited about everything else.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, okay, like let's say I go update Exchange or my application. Some files are going to stay the same. Some files are going to be new. But if the file hash changes, then all of a sudden I have to like rinse and repeat. So I'm wondering if you can then also include like, cool, I know at this time and date I ran Exchange updates. So I know like, okay, I can go update those hashes. But also like if I'm running this again quickly, like I can say like, oh, this is created 2 minutes ago. And I suspect I have a web shell, like, cool, then I can quickly filter that. So that's kind of interesting.
Yep, that's a solid add. I'll definitely do that. That's really good. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so Jose, as you were alluding to the feature of sheep sweeper, I started working on that. A couple things. I was working on something else too. I was working on a way of extracting keywords, unique keywords out of all the shells and grouping that. And my idea was that I would have a way where it would do it based on entropy and also keywords. So, because shells typically have like the obvious, kind of keywords in them, and combine all that, and you have a list of unique ones that you could use. I don't know if anybody caught it in my temp directory here, but I have like top words and things like that. So definitely something I was geeking out on. And then the other one was scoring it. I was working on the scoring the other day too, because I think that's another really solid way, like keywords, entropy, what's the scores of those two, and then combined have a weights based on that, and then there's like a final score for those. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and again, like us being like, like you can chip all this to Splunk and just like, sorry, I was gonna say like us being Splunk nerds, like we can ship all this stuff to Splunk and you can literally do the keyword and all that like funsies, enrichments, like post collection. But this is awesome, man. It's hard to find shells. Let alone sweep them,
Yes.
Hate that PHP, baby. Like,
yeah,
I'm wondering. Like, again,
this is fun.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, everybody at once.
I would say, like, from EDR perspective, obviously, you're kind of limited from explicitly from like a file create. Like, you're not going to see the interactions unless there's things coming off of the what's the word I'm looking for, the web server process, right? Whether it's IIS, W3WP, Apache, etc., for like child commands, etc. But like just seeing that, and then all of a sudden, oh, it's stealing stuff out of emails. Like EDR's not going to see that. So the point is like looking at the file create timestamps for anything suspicious locations. But then most commonly, where do you go? You go to the logs. You go to like IIS or Apache's logs and looking for the different requests surrounding that time frame to kind of like validate that. But this is just another great tool to like accompany that, but also using the UF, to your point, like systematically pull it in, especially when you have like not just one server, but if you have like fleets of them, go find it. Especially like think of like a managed service provider that's running like 100 Exchange servers.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Good old web hosting.
Yeah.
Can your MSSP detect that web shell?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, right? It's like I just felt very like almost helpless without a POC or much to ship, you know, like let's like actually go solve something. And I feel like this actually gets us to a place where it's kind of solving something, which I'm really happy about. I thought about it from like a live response perspective too, like a CVLR, like just like, you know, run it across those web servers. Yep. Upload, run, get output. Yep.
So I mean, we joke about it all the time of not exposing your EDR server to the interwebs, especially when all of them run for their response capabilities as system level. But it's like an instance where you could programmatically script a live response session on 50 of your Exchange servers, upload the shell script, run it, collect the file output, and then analyze it. But if we could do it better than that terrible way of doing it, let's do that.
Yeah, even like post compromises or whatever, or I mean, you think like about like a server that's been popped like a year ago, and then all of a sudden you run this, and you're like, why is these entropies in my ranges or whatever? Or like, why is this here? And you start to realize your web server's been owned for a long time.
Yeah, and you think long term, you're not going to like IS logs. Chances are those things are already overwritten. What the default's I think 30 days. Like the usual default setup. So yeah, especially, and then if you get more hits, like I'm sure that, you know, because it's a race condition between file size and time range. I don't know, it's been a minute, but so if you have more activity, like you have a faster chance of those logs being overwritten. That's problematic when you're talking about a long-term potential access and breach.
Yep.
I wonder how common it is when somebody drops a shell, like go in there and clean up logs too, right? Like, or I mean, you now have shell access to the box. Like, and that's like some of these already do that, right? Like Apache logs and Nginx logs just wipe out the activity of the shell, right? Like, I don't know. I haven't played with web shells in a while.
Shells are crazy. Like I was looking at an old one on my old school blog. And I remember when I worked it was at an MSSP, and we had run into a web shell, and it was literally a dude like traversing the internet, and he was just on a website, and all of a sudden he just tripped our web shell like IDS alert. And I looked into it because I think it was like an analyst marked it as like false positive. I'm like, well, it's a web shell. Web shells are never false positives. Like, let me see this. And so I went and dug into it. Here it is. It's so old school. Don't laugh. It was a JPEG image with an embedded base 64. And it like tripped, right? Because it's just looking at the image, his browser rendered it. And it was just like weird decode stuff. Yeah, it was blocked by the Palo. That's what it was. I think the analyst had hit it or something. Interesting, right? Like, there's a lot of strange stuff with web shells.
Think of all of your appliances that are running a web server for your interface.
You got me
firewall. Your firewall, your edge appliances, your Move It applications. If you have an interface, like you have shells.
Yeah. Yep. Breakfast. Web shells for breakfast. What are you thinking about, Jose?
Yeah, what's your
Nginx? So reminded me, talking about Lua, reminded me about OpenResty, which basically is like allows you to implement Lua on Nginx, like in flight. So request comes in, you can run like Lua code on that request and then do whatever you want with it. And like a lot of these, I don't know if they do anymore, but like I know originally Cloudflare, for example, a lot of their mitigations is like built exactly like on Lua using OpenResty. And it's like imagine running something like this in flight. Like request comes in, is there like, what's the entropy? We know like common entropy or whatever. Like what's the shell in here? Like it won't even don't even make it to disk. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out like how to prevent. Like, okay, one thing is like, okay, yeah, we're compromised. We're gonna hunt for this thing. Like, how do you prevent this thing? Period. Right? Like in my mind, I don't even know. Again, I'm thinking about this. I was like, do you tighten down your web directories where you can't write anything unless you're like some sort of like deployment process, or you sign the stuff in there and then check against signatures, right? Like, or again, a WAF or something like that upstream. I'm thinking out loud, guys. Like, I'm just like, how do you prevent? Like, one thing is hunting for it, but like, how do you go about preventing period of shell being dropped? And I mean, there's the obvious, like, don't have stuff like SQL injections. Right? Yeah, great, but and again, a WAF will help with some of this stuff, but I don't think
that's an interesting perspective. Like, how, like, could you prevent a write, but you couldn't lock it down? How are you going to update it? How are you going to do your manager updates?
Well, you would have to
there's
sign,
files that get created on the fly.
sign your files. It's the only way I can think of. Like, think like a FIM, right? Like, hey, you tell your FIM, all these MD5s on this directory are good to go. You see any other thing else in there, like
Lock.
Yeah, like send an alert to the SOC immediately, right? And again, I'm not defending thousands of web servers today, but I'm sure like
I think I remember with I thought it was with like Bit9 that, or whatever it's called today. I thought you would like put it into like a certain mode. You would tell like, I have an hour. I need an hour to be unlocked on a path or the whole thing, and then you would just do your update, and then it would go and rehash everything, redo its process, and then lock back down. But yeah, I don't know. Like, that's what we did at one of my last companies. Is we had Bit9 on every web server, and it was just only things that were approved could run, right? Yeah. But most orgs don't have that.
That's so, because I also had Bit9 experience. Like, great for Windows. We didn't have Linux or Mac, so the capabilities on that, like that's what I'm thinking of. Like now, like, okay, how do we do it on Linux or Nix based systems?
I'm gonna age myself just a tiny bit here.
Just a smidge.
Just a smidge. A few decades ago, I did this similar thing with Tripwire.
Tripwire.
Still around, and Jesus Christ, I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm sure like OS queries, like the FIM modules, you can check files and stuff like that, right? But it's expensive.
I was thinking
like,
Velociraptor too has a way to inventory, and I was thinking about that when I was writing this. Like, is there a way to do this? To help.
Like, cool, run this. I mean, if you think you run this, but like, hey, by the way, you're trying to defend yourself like proactively. What do you do? Stall 30 agents. Exactly.
No perimeter stuff. Firewalls, delete them.
Just run everything, Barracudas all over the place.
Like, look at like even just the past like month. What has been the thing that's been the most problematic? Appliances, edges, things you can't like put anything on, you can't touch. Short Barracudas, the MoveIts, like
FortiGates. Yep.
The tools that you use.
Oh, that's why I asked you this morning. I was like, Paul, have you read any other reports showing post-exploitation off of MoveIt? I don't think I've read that. It's literally they are on the app, exfiltrating your data, game over. Okay.
Think about look at like some of the stuff that's for cloud now. Buckets. Just take the stuff off the bucket and leave.
Yeah.
Crypto mining, right? Like, you haven't seen a whole bunch of it. And at some point, and you even see it now, like extortion's not just encrypting, it's stealing the data and then just ransoming you for the data alone. Like, that's most orgs these days are pretty good at being able to recover. Now, of course, there's severe instances, like you think of like the Maersk and other things of the past, like, yeah, those were massive, and from like an architectural, like there were no backups, like they did, but nowadays, like when all your stuff's in like cloud VMs, things, rinse and repeat, you can, how fast can you spin up 100 VMs in a cloud platform now? What, minutes to just Terraform, go deploy them, be done? Like, it's nothing. Even imaging on like a Mac, you can remotely image and do them up. Like, so it's pretty much data theft at this point.
AWS money printer go.
For real though.
That bill, boy.
But like it's interesting. You see, like some of these like orgs are now moving off of the cloud. Like I was like, oh, it's gonna next thing. And like security standpoint, you still run into issues. Like I think I forgot who it was. Saw on like AD Security, Trimark, Sean Metcalf had a discussion that like some of the problems you're seeing with on-prem AD still exist in the cloud. Like just moving to the cloud is not the solution. You can't lock down and structure from like IAM. And you think about it, like cloud now is just everything's tied to some user, whether it's an internal system like NT system authority spawning a process or a user spawning a process. Everything's tied to an identity. Now you just got to figure that all out. But if you can't solve it internally, how are you going to do it in the cloud when it's brand new to you? Like we're not solving anything.
We had the issue. Yeah, we had an issue with the larger org I was at, and we had an engineering group that was going to go and build a PCI-like environment on AWS, and then they did a AWS Direct Connect back to their office, and this is supposed to be an environment that was going to handle credit cards and all this processing data and everything like that. Direct Connect back to our corporate environment, and I remember asking them, like, what are you guys using for a firewall? I was like, oh, we use AWS security groups. We're good. It's like, oh, here we go. It's
interestingly.
Yeah.
I didn't fully read into it yet, but it looks like AWS came out with some new thing for granting access to EC2 instances. So when you create them, by default, you create some firewall rule that says, hey, I'm at this IP, allow me to RDP into the box. Well, now using identity, they're giving you the ability to go in without having to create and expose these things, which is kind of interesting. But again, you're coming back to identity based. Like, how do you focus on least privilege? Like, we haven't solved that and people aren't implementing them. So we're still running to the issue. So again, it doesn't solve it. You're just putting it somewhere else. And then you start, to your point, talking about the direct connects. Think about Azure and hybrid connectivity to on-prem. And there was a talk, I forgot who it was, at a refresh conference. I think Dirk John just released a blog post that also somebody else, they're unrelated, but talking about the exact same thing, released at the same time. So two people did a conference talk about abusing Kerberos to go from on-prem back to on cloud Azure to on-prem.
Yeah.
So again,
yeah.
And then you think about oh, endpoint's dead. How do you access your cloud resources? An endpoint. But now it just becomes problematic because you gain access, you get the tokens, right? One thing we didn't go into is, hey, Paul, when you set up G-Cloud and you run init, where does your authentication and your tokens get stored? Well, they're stored in a SQLite database right in app data. You can go read that, pull those, and then replay them if they're already authenticated. Congrats. Now you just have less.
I want to say there's a few Sigma rules looking for
Definitely.
credentials on your local machine for cloud providers. I want to say I may be. I know somewhere there are rules written about this. Yep. I want to say Sigma.
Yeah, there definitely is. I do remember seeing something like that too.
Looking for AWS creds file or the GCP project files. Yeah, they're sitting there, man.
You got SQLite database browser, which is free. Here, I'm going to share my screen real quick. If y'all got a minute. If not, I'll just do it.
Oh, we got minutes.
All right, so DB browser for SQLite, great tool. Highly recommend you go do it and go look into it. Let's go to good old G-Cloud. Here we go, database files. Boom. Account ID, access token, token exploratory, etc. Well, let's go take a look at some stuff. There it is. There's the access token, right? We could put this into JSON because it structures a JSON. So when we created that, and which we didn't delete, was when we created it, which was, no, that was from your thing. But here, no, I don't want to expose that. But you get the idea. So they're stored in there. Let's open the other one, which is something slightly different, the credentials database. And there's the authentication. So these are the scopes. So remember, when you have an account, you give it permissions, you assign it scopes of what it can and can't do. So in these cases, like access to compute, SQL Service Login, App Engine, Cloud, user info. And there's other ones based on whatever it is. So in this case, like here's the full token. I'm going to go delete and revoke these now because I'm exposing these to the people on YouTube and the interweb. But like that's it. They're stored right in here. So you pull these database files, you can export them out, you can structure it into a JSON, and then simply, I think it's like there's a login specifically and log in, figure out what the parameters are, and then you explicitly point to the path of your JSON file, and then it'll go and do your authentication. And then once you're there, you're granted access. So if you can export it out, and same thing is with JSON web tokens for Azure. So if they have PowerShell modules, so if your administrators are using PowerShell modules for that, same idea. If you know where they're stored, you just go grab them, and then you're off to the races. Like you can, whatever that person has permission to, and then of course from there, obviously there's timeouts that you have to pay attention to, but if you're authenticated, get a nice JSON, is it JWT refresh token? Something like that. I don't know. Not a webmaster. Not yet.
I was just thinking as you were sharing that would be a really cool add to the Canary token project from Thinkst of GCP. They have AWS, but they don't have the others. I thought that would be cool.
Where's
Another
Casey?
one. Yeah, where is he?
Wait, I thought they did have a GCP certificate or service account.
Do they? AWS. Oh, Azure. Kube config.
Azure has a similar config too. So
Yeah, I think that's for creating a cert. Well, you could definitely open it up though. Interesting. I'd be curious how you can do that one off. That makes sense. You could. Interestingly enough. Another
Rabbit hole.
Yeah, the one cool thing about GCP is like, and you'll see it in Dave's talk, which is when you have an account and you look at the scope and permissions assigned to it, it will then Google yell and be like, hey, you have like 8,000 permissions assigned to this. Like this is overly scoped. Like you should look at turning this down. Like it's you go to the IAM page and it's right there. It'll be like, got 8,000, like way over permissioned. And I think that I think I enabled 30 or 40 services in the project I was working on to test out with. And I was testing a whole bunch of other things. I think the Elastic integration for GCP and Google Workspace, I enabled a whole bunch. And then I was just turning stuff on because I didn't know what I needed permission to in order to run some of these tests. So I was like, well, I'll just enable it all and see what happens. Then there was also the managed Active Directory, which was a very fun experience. So if you ever want to talk about Google's managed Active Directory, I have stories for you.
Yeah,
Good lessons learned on that one.
I had no idea that was there. So I thought that was neat, but yeah, it's cool.
I don't see the cost savings. Like it costs you potentially up to $280 a month, and that's like bare bones minimum. And that's not including like the cloud DNS that you need to set up as well. So I don't see like, sure, you can have redundancy, but from a cost savings perspective, I don't see how in some cases going to the cloud makes sense. Like I just, again, not a cloud expert, no idea, but in looking at some of these base pricing and then thinking about like, okay, if I have one account in AD and that's what it's going to cost me doing nothing, I have 20,000 objects and let's say thousands of systems, like that's insane.
Yeah,
talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. But
drop in the pond.
That's my tirade. I don't know. Lock down your stuff, scope your permissions, take off all your edge devices, don't expose management ports and pages to the internet. Just shut it all off.
Switch out your Fortinet for a Sonic wall.
I've been thinking we had Fortinet recently. Sonic wall was a couple months back. What we haven't seen in a minute is a good Cisco way to say.
Oh, Cisco, yeah. That would be good.
Cisco. I don't know. I thought there was a recent Palo one too.
I don't remember.
PSNs, man.
Hey.
That's it. Everybody PSNs.
Yeah, sensor bus.
Free PSD for life.
Say what you will, but running OpenSense for years, top tier. And then OpenSense, which is also a good one. And if you're willing to give OpenSense, or ET Labs all of your data, they'll give you ET Pro license for your firewall. So if you want those sweet top tier ET Pro rule sets, give them all your data, and they'll give you a Pro license. I was thinking about it for the home lab. Well, OpenSense is free, so you just gotta have a box, deploy it out, and then for a Pro license, like they give you it's basically just the OpenET rule set as default. But if you want like the Pro ones, like you would buy for like your org, they'll give you a Pro license. You just have to give them your data. Which look at all my sweet malware.
Ransom already took it, so might as well, Sharing is
some
caring,
shells.
right? Exactly.
You can write it in Lua, the only true programming language.
Here, I have a bunch of malware I've been holding on to. Thank you very much. I don't know where to put it.
I'm trying to think the last time I've seen something interesting in Lua. When was it? Yes, but I feel like it had like a really big hype train, and then nothing happened. But I feel like it's still around for reasons.
It's a good embedded language. It has its uses, like everything in life. Right? It has its uses. It's a good embedded language. Like it does its thing pretty well. But there's not a whole lot of use cases for it. I think that's a reality, right? I think it's in the realm of like Tickle. And what was the other one? Like Punicode kind of stuff. Not Punicode. What was it? I think it's Tickle. There's another one. I know, again, they're like obscure, but like they're meant to run inside something else, if that makes any sense. That's running.
What is Tickle? Is that legitimate, or are you just making stuff up?
No. Man, I think it's TKL or
TIKL.
It's a high-level, general-purpose interpreted dynamic programming language.
That's it right there. That's what she's.
Interesting.
It's been around for 35 years.
I'm telling you, man.
Lua's been around for 30 years. I know, my Lua tweet, I Googled it. I was like, how old is Lua? And Wikipedia is like 30 years old. I'm like, boom, best time to plant a tree. 30 years ago, baby.
I mean,
next up, Tickle webshells. Tickle modules being dropped.
But think about what's running the backbone of banking.
Oh my God.
COBOL, Fortran, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe some Pascal.
Not a dark place.
You're going to a place I can't follow you, Paul.
But it's true. Banking is a next level.
Look.
Paul said no comment. I'm out of here. IBM 400 or whatever. What is it?
Ooh, is that AS400?
Point. Yeah, AS400. The endpoint. Who's your endpoint now, right?
The mainframe.
I am the endpoint.
I am the endpoint.
Write it in Tickle.
Absolutely wild.
All right, I tweeted ShellSweep, not SheepSweep.
Bumming.
But yeah.
SheepSweep is good. I was dying when you sent that. I was like, SheepSweep? What is this? I was like, it's awesome though.
That's so good.
And everybody's concerned about AI taking over the world. But we decide ShellSweep's not the good name, it's SheepSweep. Like,
yeah. Autocorrect got that one. So good. That was funny. SheepSweep.
It's also like times where you're trying to like say something, but it keeps converting the word. Like, look, how many times have I actually said duck? Like, calculate how many times I've actually said duck. I know you're tracking that.
Yep.
Why do you keep changing it to that?
Yes.
Okay, big it.
Oh my gosh.
Anywho, this has been a fun tirade.
This is awesome.
We should do some more
Thank you,
cloud
guys.
stuff. Who else does cloud?
Yeah. We have AWS stuff. I could do a lot of AWS stuff.
I know nothing about AWS.
Who else does cloud? Does anybody else do cloud on the line today?
Yeah. Who else is a cloud expert? Maybe there's some maintainers that are cloud
anybody
people.
like to lace cloud stuff with their work?
No idea. No idea. No, anybody. Looking around like, wait, what? Me? Nothing. It's like, what are you doing? Me? Nothing.
What exactly do you do?
Exactly. What do you do here? I just think
What do you do here?
Just write memes.
No, man. It's.
How do I get paid for that?
Yeah, right. You know, we were saying earlier the whole thing with AD and jump back and forth. Somebody, I think it was Sean too, or somebody, I don't know, somebody I read from somewhere. My mind just keeps going back to that for some reason, which is like, even specifically in cloud, my mind is always like, find those like crunchy spots where something is connecting to something in cloud, like again, like on-prem to itself or to another vendor, and that's where you're gonna get all the weirdness. Like that's where it's at, you know, like I you know, like app authorizations, or you know, hey, I got to pass you some like certificate for you to authenticate OAuth something else. Like that's where the crunchy happens, and to me, that's where I'm like super curious about stuff. And asking about the tools part earlier, I've been thinking a lot about like, okay, well, I don't know, I haven't seen, and Mike, I asked you this a while back, like I haven't seen like a breakdown of tools. Like there isn't, like there are tools out there, but like unlike like we're all very familiar with Mimikatz, we're all very familiar with Interpreter and CoboStrike and some aspect, you know, like all these tools are like common in our industry now, and like how many folks are actually familiar with a GCP exploit or like I don't know. How often do we see them? Like,
and I think it's different because ultimately you're looking for misconfigurations. I don't see the level of vulnerabilities like on a traditional endpoint being at the same scale and capability as like a web, because it's really just a web app, right? You're making REST API calls, right? Whether you're using the command line tools or you're doing, you know, writing a JavaScript or some tool, like it's just API calls. And you're looking for those things to just escalate and elevate to go from point A to point B and bouncing through identities of where it is. And then to your point though, OAuth applications, like it was interesting looking for like in Google Workspace, when you authorize an OAuth application for the user, right? Like, so as a user account, like that's what you want to use, that'll like you get logs for that, which go back into Google Workspace, which obviously you can take Google Workspace, ship it in GCP logging. But there's permissions that you have to set. So like the one thing I don't know about how Azure does it, but if you want to go say, I want to hit the Gmail API, right? So think of like tools that are going to watch for like inboxes, like think of like a Sublime is a great example, or other tools that are going to connect to the Gmail inbox so they can delete emails that are phishing, etc. You have to create an OAuth application. Just having a service account and a token doesn't allow you to go interact with like data, like specifically like or in Google Drive or in Gmail APIs. Like you have to create an OAuth application, and those have to be certified by Google. So there's like different things you can do from like a capability of limiting scopes and permissions. But OAuth applications, think about like the amount of times a user gets a Microsoft 365 phishing thing, says, hey, let's connect in. You just click OK, and then it reads off all of your users. And even though that's scoping wise, you can only read, that's still information that can be used as for a later part of the attack. But I don't know, we could rant and rave and do comparisons all day.
I was going to say, Black Hills Reverse Shell has a great talk on, and training too, on how to do like dynamic code tokens for stealing 2FA. And again, he's using like OAuth, like I think some aspect to register a page to phish a user. and it's just there's a lot. Like I don't know, there's a lot to be solved still.
Bo's breaching the cloud perimeter bars is top notch.
Yeah.
I'm just like, we haven't even solved bootkits yet, but you guys are like all over the cloud. I'm like, come on, like
drivers are don't matter now. Drivers, they're old news. Close up shop. Bootkits, forget about it. Like we're not solving it. Like let's just move on. It's one of those things you can't solve, and so we should just quit it and then go to the next thing, which is now cloud. Like we're just gonna solve cloud.
Cloud boots.
I am full frontally kidding about just moving on from drivers and bootkits. Like again, how are you going to access all these cloud resources?
I can't say any good cautions.
So good. Paul's like,
use the cloud.
Warning /S.
Just kidding. But not really. Like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, the amount of up in arms people are getting about drivers is absolutely insane. Like they've been vulnerable and abused for years. And then it's like, oh, this thing's going to go kill your EDR. It's like, no, we're just going to take a vulnerable driver that's been around and then we're going to drop it to disk. We're going to, because we have admin permissions on the box, we're just going to elevate it, then go kill our stuff. And like, everybody's losing their minds. Like it's the same technique.
$3,000
new.
Do we
$3,000? I'm in the wrong business. That's what they wanted. Yo, I'll make sure that thing executes every time.
It started at $3,000, and then like the first 50 buyers, or after 50 buyers or something, it went up to $5,000 for a known vulnerable driver.
So does this
that's freely available on
Spyboy?
Virus Total?
What was that, Jose?
Does this qualify Spyboy for SE Magazine Award or something? Like some like InfoSec Award at the end of the year? Like, hey, dude, you got it. You got it.
That's an interesting
People thinking about drivers. Gotta go kill the wrong EDR.
So what? 50 times 3,000 is 150 grand, and then 5,000 for every sale after that.
Yep.
And if you look at like what was it? Terminator, I think was another one that dropped. Very similar. Yep. Again, just pulling a driver.
It's the same thing.
It's what? How many drivers are you all up to on lull drivers?
Too many.
You gotta be like 1,000 mark, right? Give or take.
Can't say. Just kidding. Yeah, we right now we're at like 600, I think, right now. I think with or without the next merge, and the next merge is going to bring in, I think, another 700. So we should be at about 1,200-ish.
Vulnerable drivers.
Yeah. So what's interesting, I don't know if you caught this from Will Dorman, we're finding that vendors are air quoting patching the drivers by putting an update in them that basically says requires admin, and that's considered a patch for making it not vulnerable anymore. But what else was shared on Twitter, similar threads, was even though they modified it to be admin only or run with admin only or whatever it was, the actual vulnerabilities are still within the code. Like they're not fixing it. They're just saying requires admin. And that's it. That's the fix.
It's like putting your OSTs on GitHub and saying for educational purposes only.
Yep. Yep.
Might exactly. As well, right?
Yep.
I'm trying to
think.
Nobody
would ever use it.
Would it be solved with SACLs? I don't know. SACLs? Couldn't tell you. It's an interesting idea, though.
I think the hardest thing is folks need to. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's the poll that you put out on Twitter, is how many people are actually inventorying drivers, and what does that look like? Like, how are you inventorying them if you are? Like, that's.
Nobody's inventorying them.
Yeah.
It would be easier to say, how many of you are not inventorying your drivers? You'll get more response out of that than you would if you are inventorying them, right? Like flip the question around a little bit and you'll just see like the flood of it.
Yeah.
I keep hearing folks are just using low drivers now to check for it.
I mean, and great, like you're shining a light on it. But what do you do with it now? Right? Like, cool, I have, let's say, For whatever let's say you dish out 50 Alienwares for your devs, and that's what they're building. Cool. You have, I think I gave you 2 specifically from my build for driver's mic that were potentially vulnerable.
Yep.
What do you do now? You're gonna rip the driver out?
Yeah.
Then that breaks whatever that driver was supporting. Like, so what do you do? I don't know. Think of like what ships in an org when they're building out like imaging machines. HP boxes just blasted out across 300, 500 devices. Cool. Now what do you do to remediate it? You found 30 vulnerable drivers on every box. Like, now what?
Apply to Dell, get the job, pass your driver, quit, go back to it.
Guy's a legend. It's like a decade old at this point, but that guy is a legend.
I love that.
Because I'm also thinking like, okay, that interview process was not like 3 interviews, 30 minutes each, and you're hired type of thing. Like, you're talking like multiple interviews, maybe some technical coding stuff, right? Like, you go through a process to do this. Hand in your resignation from the job you've probably had for many years. Go there, submit your PR, get it merged, good to go, and then bounce out. Like, props to that. Huge fan.
Once you see your code just like merge and shipped, update load drivers and move on to the next org. Move on to the next org.
Oh my gosh. That's actually very interesting. You bring a little bit of that up, because what I found with the UEFI bootloader list, I thought this was really interesting. I think it's not often, but every now and then, it's like the UEFI. We're going back to bootloaders here. Bootloader CSV. Oh my gosh, why is it so hard to find all of a sudden? Am I in Google or am I on drunk Google? Here we go. UEFI? Sorry, this is horrible. Did the website go down? Well, anyway, if you look at the UEFI revocation list, that's the word, stand by. They update it not often enough, right? And the idea is that when they do update it, you, the admin of all 50,000 endpoints that you have, are now supposed to go one-to-many boxes and implement this. And Microsoft has like a doc where it's like, do this. And by the way, if you wreck your machine, you're done for. Good luck. That's just for bootkits.
Didn't they just come out with a patch this past week where you actually have to go add reg keys because they're not enabled by default for a specific and then based on whatever version you have of Windows? Look.
Well, they had that
say you have a gold
patch that came out for the bootloader for Black Lotus, the bootkit for Black Lotus. That was a patch that you now have to go deploy, but there's like 3 or 4 extra steps that you have to do post patch. Like, bootkits are lit, man. Like, if you want to live in a place where you will destroy machines, obviously, this is the place to play. Like, it's wild.
But I thought Windows 11 was supposed to fix all of this.
But also, look at this website. Like, does anything else scream 1997 more than this? And this is supposed to be like your like truth for evil bootloaders.
Like, nobody got time for UI when you're solving bootkit problems, all right? Like, what are you going to spend your time on? Do you want to solve bootkits or do you want to have a nice looking website?
I know, right? Like
judging a book by the cover now, man. Like,
I'm sorry.
It's true.
Just saying. I'm just
Mike,
saying.
you just click, you end up in GeoCities somehow. Like, what's just happening? What's going on now?
Oh, but my badge is at the bottom, you know, like, oh yeah, top 100 Juarez bootloader.
So what happens when you go clicking in a website?
I know. You're next. So funny. But no, it's true. Like, what's crazy, like, if you find, I don't know where it's at right now, but if you literally find the Microsoft method to upload your revocation list, I would never feel comfortable doing that across a fleet. Like, even if it's through like group policy or like a script that I was supposed to write, like, that's sketchy.
Yeah, I was thinking you would roll this out like GPOs or Ansible or something like that, right? Like SSCM.
And here's the thing, though. You also have to be sure that even though you have a golden image that says X, how confident are you that that golden image is exactly the same and applied directly with the same configuration on every single box? You cannot.
Not confident at all. Zero confidence.
Yeah.
Even if you ran something like, okay, like I blasted out, I used SCCM, I used Ansible OS query, right, to pull that back. Okay, now I've got 50 probably different variations, different GPO settings, different applications, right? You got something like an app locker, WDAC, AirLock, Bit9, like.
Man, you're messing with the bootloader. Like, good luck. Like, to your point, admin gets it wrong. You wreck the machine. Like, you're wrecking servers now left and right. What?
Everybody's working from home, so now you got it's not 50,000 in the same building or in your 30 buildings across the globe. It's those 30 buildings, and then all of those variances at people's houses. Oh, it went down in the middle of the update. Sorry, you're done. Oh, that person's internet cut out because somebody hit a tree and the pole line went down. That box is hosed.
Dude. Yeah,
like, there's too many problems. Like to have it like this. TPM 3.0, Windows 12, it'll solve it all. Be golden. Be ready to rip.
Yeah. There is I shared it. Like, I took a screenshot of like a machine with multiple bootloaders and I tweeted it because, like, yeah. And that was just me goofing off. And I thought I was cleaning up like after, but oh yeah, here it is. I found it. You bring it over here. Because, like,
this is why you just run Linux. They don't care if you delete the bootloader.
Solid.
Delete it. I don't care. What do you want? You want 17? Put 17 on there. Do you?
You do you. You too can be a bootloader.
Look, Linux isn't trying to tell you how to live your life.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Top
I
tier.
love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Boots.
There you go.
The boots.
The boots. It's coming. So yeah, eventually we'll get
just
to
a
like.
mistake.
Yes.
Look, everybody should just throw their computers out, and we only use cell phones and tablets. They're totally secure, and they never get hacked. Breach.
It's a lot safer.
Never any side-loaded applications or theft. It's totally fine.
Oh, so good.
The safest computer is an off computer, kids. Just remember that.
Ship it back.
No, you got to just drill through the hard disk first, make sure that's gone. Especially if you got platters. SSD, you probably just smash it with a hammer and you're golden, but platters, at least 3 drill bits through it.
Yeah.
Safety first.
Safety first.
Look.
Oh, that's good.
Again, not going to tell you how to live your life, but it might be a good idea for some personal
I'm
protection.
sure Linux can boot that though. I'm sure Linux will boot the 3 drill through.
It would too. Yep. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, if the fermentation in your disk, I'm just going to skip through this entire section.
Look, we'll boot.
So true.
You're not going to have anything, but we're going to boot. You can be sure of that.
And this is why I run Arch Linux. Survives 3 drills in the head. Oh man.
Using Black Arch.
Thank God it's Friday. It's been a
my
long
hacking tools.
It's been a long month so far.
Hey, how many days are in June?
Only been 16 days.
30? 30 or
75?
31?
I don't know. Like
30.
There's still
What
time.
year are you speaking of? That's where I'm stuck. What year is it?
Where's ChatGPT when I need it for how many days are in June?
It's 30. Google
Is it 30? Well, there's 14 days left. So you got plenty of time for something like a Cisco ASA to get popped or, your Palos. Anybody still running Juniper? Like, it's been a minute.
Oh, yeah.
No, please. Actually, I think they do run FreeBSD under the hood.
I think you're right.
When was the last time we had a BSD vuln?
Juno OS is based on BSD. I'm pretty sure. Like, I think.
Let's see, what other? What other edge
Google,
applications
Google,
can we
Google.
target?
Yep. FreeBSD.
Yeah, man. I mean, distinctly remembering writing scripts on it.
But why?
But why?
Why?
Was
Where's
it-
my why though meme? What specifically why though?
Why
fonts?
the- So back in the olden days, you basically know raw stuff right on them. You run scripts like, hey, I'm seeing some attack downstream. Like get the
Oh.
Juniper thing to just block it upstream. That's why. but I'm sure you can use it for other stuff. Got a
Like,
full blown OS right there, man. Shiny.
I have a fancy why though meme where it has like a Mardi Gras face mask on. It's top tier. So we have two. There's why though, and then there's why though fancy. So I'll track that down. I don't remember where I found the picture, but absolutely need it for this.
Did you put it on the Atomic Slack? I thought you did. I thought there was.
I don't
I thought you
remember.
mentioned it to me.
I have to
Why though?
figure out a way to scrape all the emojis from different Slack channels so I can aggregate them into a central folder. So then anytime I join a new one, because I got into like 2 more Slack channels and then I'm looking for emojis and they don't exist. So I just need a way to like hit an API real quick and upload and add them.
Now we're talking
If
about
anybody from
Drupal.
Slack knows how I can do that, that would be phenomenal. I'll even make sure that the file name is exactly what I want the emoji name to be, and then just do the magic.
Oh. I'll write it in Lua, and you can do it from your Barracuda.
Only running CUDA from now on. Nobody's popping those keys again.
Yeah.
Or you can get them cheap.
I personally only ever operate from an edge device, so that's BSG.
What about BGP? Nobody's touching BGP these days.
Jesus Christ.
That you know of. We need a narrator. We need the narrator that you know of.
Where's David Attenborough?
Yep. Yep. It.
I just had a heart attack. Spotify just turned on. So it just blasted into my headphones.
Oh, that's true.
I've had too much
BGP
coffee.
suck. If we talk about BGP pack, I'm just like walk out. When does that happen? Just kidding. Jesus.
Is that Twitter account still active? Are they live where there was like an automated bot or live tweeting of BGP hijacks? They might have probably died because of the whole Twitter API fiasco.
Oh,
I don't know. I used to follow one of those.
yeah. There was a website too. I thought.
Yeah, you're talking about like whole blocks just
It's BGP.
All of a sudden,
from the US to Russia. Yeah, not a big deal. No problems.
it's just another day on the internet.
It's totally fine. It's safe. Nothing happens.
It's just web traffic.
I think Cisco. It was a Cisco. I think it was this BGP stream. I think.
Oh.
I remember following an account that did that a while back. I'm following. Actually, I think this is it because I'm following this account.
Oh no, it is. Yeah, BGP stream. Yeah, from Cisco.
They bought it. Wasn't Cisco originally though, right? I think they must have bought it at some point. It wasn't originally a Cisco account. I don't think so. Yeah, outages. Nice.
Is that like Elon's jet tracker where it got acquired?
It did. That's actually funny.
Ended up buying it out. That's awesome.
I don't know.
Oh,
I think Mark Cuban paid the guy to not have it, and he's like, okay. But obviously, like I think those are now hosted because of the API you have to pay for them. So I think that was because the guy was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't know. I didn't follow it too much, but it was pretty funny.
I think I saw that the Frog and Toad Twitter bot was back.
Frog and Toad?
In case do you not follow Frog and Toad?
No.
We are in the after hours.
This is the longest stream
Yeah.
we've had, by the way. We did like 45 minutes of actual atomic stuff, and now we're just off the races. Frog and Toad fan page, yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah, Frog and Toad is great. If you need to follow them, I don't know how they're paying for it at this point because I remember he mentioned it was going to get very expensive for him.
I have a suggestion idea. We should do a section maybe another week on Atomic on a Friday of just like obscure random Twitter bots we follow. Because I have a list of like a handful of this, right? Frog and Toad, never heard of it. Like, subscribe, following right now. A minute.
There's a Red Panda Hourly, which I follow. It's an automated thing, and it tweets out Red Panda pictures hourly. That's a good one I like to follow.
Yeah.
There's Calvin and Hobbes. I feel like Calvin and Hobbes
There's
back in the day.
There's a couple really solid cat ones that.
Yes.
Oh, this one is not a bot. Interesting. Here you go. It's like places where cats shouldn't be.
That's a good one. I also like cats with jobs.
Yeah. The military cats, remember that one?
Military cats is top tier. Seriously, if you're not following those three, you are missing out.
So freaking good. Giant cat. So good.
I don't know who's still hanging out with us on Twitch, but we appreciate you.
Yep. You deserve
They've been riding along for the whole 2 hours of whatever this transpired into for the past hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, man. All right. I think we got a jam.
Let's do this again.
Gotta bounce. This has been fun, though.
Yes.
I don't know why I'm putting this slide back up. No one's going to see this part.
Yeah, if you made it this far, so like you just reach out to us. We'll give you some stickers and some shirts or something. This is
kind of Friday are you having? What's wrong with it?
Honestly, though, would you rather deal with the 13 0 days that dropped and are blowing up environments, or hang out for some ramblings for the past hour? Like,
yeah,
I know what I would be doing.
Yeah, got me there.
Big facts.
You could be writing some Lua right now, but you're here.
Like only APT's writing Lua, Mike.
Yes. I think everything I make from here on out is going to be in Lua, just for the kudas. All right. Y'all have fun. Thank you for listening and joining, and yeah, enjoy the GCP content an hour ago. And ShellSweep.
Toodles.
See ya. Have fun.